Hi folks, this is my third attempt at making a long form video about emotions and awakening, which I think speaks to how incredibly convoluted this topic might be. So I'm going to give it another shot and maybe you can tell me how I did. But yeah, I think the easiest way to kind of tackle this is through a little bit of storytelling around my own process, which has been ongoing throughout life, because I really have had experiences of states of consciousness my entire life. But I would say that my journey of stabilization probably began 8 years ago. 8 years ago. Yeah, and it was following some particularly intensive experiences of non-dual reality, which were accompanied by other states of consciousness that were very intensive, otherworldly experiences. And although, there's a lot of different ways of perceiving the concept of Kundalini rising and all that sort of thing, I can like roughly cluster them together into something of that phenomena. And just as an aside, if anyone's really interested in some good work on good perspectives on Kundalini, I would highly recommend the podcast on Kundalini by Dr. Christopher Wallace on Tantra Illuminated. It's definitely on Spotify. It's probably on some other platforms as well. Wow, it's so cold. My lips are going numb. It's hard to form words. Yeah, so for me, there was this kind of, I guess, a threshold between the experiences that I had as a child, an adolescent, and a young adult. And then in my 30s, when I started my therapeutic training, I was studying to become a creative arts therapist. This sort of threshold of experiences occurred, and I had to kind of step over that threshold into a journey towards really stabilizing and integrating my spiritual understanding of the world with my life, because it was no longer possible at that stage. It really felt like I couldn't kind of continue as I was. And so during this time, this threshold stage, there was an immense amount of very, very intensive emotion arising that was linked to unprocessed trauma. And I have a great deal of appreciation for that part of my process, because, I really did have to look at some pretty dark aspects of myself. And it put me in a good stead to continue that work of excavating what it is that I might want to be avoiding, and to bring that into awareness with a great deal of compassion, and also with a sense of accountability to myself. However, what I did notice from this sort of like uprising of traumatic memory and emotion is that there was a real, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. But I was getting more and more drawn into this cycle of like, I've got to work it out. I've got to kind of do the processing. I've got to clear the stuff. I've got to do all of the shadow work, and then the intergenerational stuff comes up, and now I'm in this like intergenerational soup. And yeah, I think it's a side quest that many people who who have intensive awakening experiences tend to loop around for a very long time. And I'm certainly not advocating for suppressing that kind of emotion at all, quite the opposite. You know, it's very necessary to honor and acknowledge and be with the experience. However, there's a difference between holding that experience with awareness and giving it the spaciousness, the inner space to go through its like amplification and then de-amplification naturally. And this idea that we have to kind of sort it out, or you know, getting caught into that human doing tendency of really, and it doesn't even have to be like an intellectualization thing. It's just like the human urge towards resolution. Like, I need this to be resolved. And then once it's resolved, I can get on with the rest of my like spiritual unfolding. So for me, at least, I've found allowing the lack of resolution of many things has been a pathway for me into much greater peacefulness and respect for myself. And I don't know how useful that is to anyone listening, but I would offer that, you know, resolution isn't necessarily what we need all of the time. Another way in which I think emotion can kind of hijack or confuse an awakening process is in these expansive states of consciousness, which, you know, are lovely, but they're still just experiences. If we're sitting in a similar map to awakening, which we may not be, but for me the map of awakening is pertaining to like the marker of awareness as the ground of being, and anything arising within that awareness is also arising from awareness, but it's not kind of the focus point, right? And so when we have really beautiful, expansive, unifying states of consciousness, we can fall under the impression that that state of consciousness is the awakening, and that we need to like maintain that state of consciousness. This usually, at least from my perspective, comes from an unconscious emotional content in that state of consciousness. For example, the expansiveness is accompanied by ecstasis or bliss or, you know, great joy. And it's wonderful to enjoy that joy. But if we're really attached to like maintaining that emotion, we then start to seek after these states, and we lose the ground of being, which is the one that's experiencing that state and this state. So that my very banal human state is just as divine and just as profound as this kind of like ecstatic moment. But we may not be able to contact that if we're really invested in this emotional content, consciously or unconsciously. So starting to recognize firstly, that there is emotions occurring during awakening, because I have met my fair share of people that feel that they no longer have that kind of content. which to me is a warning sign. Yeah, that there is these emotions present, and once we start to kind of identify them and understand the way that they're, the psychological word would be coupling with the state or the experience, we need to then kind of like decouple that emotion from the state and to start to ground back into conscious awareness as the continuity which sustains all of these different things. Emotions are a great gift, and I've mentioned this in a previous video. Awakening is not perfection, but you know, our emotional content is a great gift because it does help us in many ways to cultivate compassion. And so if we're having awakening experiences and there is an absence of emotional content, you know, maybe like moments of opening without kind of with a predominance of equanimity, perhaps is not such a problem. But if in an ongoing way there seems to be a void of emotion or a mistaking of equanimity for unfeeling, non-feelingness, because equanimity is not having an emotional response to something. Equanimity is being able to maintain our open curiosity towards whatever happens to be arising without becoming stuck in judgments about it. And I say stuck in judgments because it would also mean that equanimity includes an open curiosity towards judgment that might be arising as well. Because all of these different aspects, whether it's emotion, judgment, you know, our reactivity, they're all kind of guides and signposts that can help us to navigate life. And we don't want them to be gone. We're not trying to clear them through our spiritual practices or through the process of awakening. We're simply coming to understand the way in which there is an interconnectedness in all beings, all things, and that consciousness, which connects all, is the creator of our experience. And if we remain in that awareness, then experiencing emotion is no more of a problem than not experiencing emotion. You know, it's just allowing the natural arisings. You know, that the Wu way of Taoism. Right? It's just nature as it is, doing its thing. No need to will ourselves towards one way of being or another. And I think it's very easy in both of those extremes, whether it's through experiencing very intensive emotions attached to high or expansive states, or whether it's having windows of such clarity that emotion is not present, we can get attached to both of those extremes because they both have their own degree of pleasantness. It can feel extremely pleasant to someone, particularly if they've experienced quite overwhelming emotions in their lives, to have moments without perceived emotion. And that's why dissociation is such an incredibly helpful tool for many people who've experienced trauma. And I think we need to be able to discern between dissociation and equanimity. And that is a discernment that isn't really facilitated very well in a lot of standard popular this is my cold lips, popularized I love that I do unedited videos, media on awakening. Yeah, I'm just gonna leave you at that because my mouth is freezing. So if you enjoy this content, please like and subscribe. I'd love to connect more. Let me know what you think in the comments or what your own experiences are. Yeah, just really enjoying the back and forth with some folks who've been commenting. So you're welcome. Bye.